Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I hope you're having a great week. It is Tuesday, so I thought I'd put together a quick book tag video. And since it was the 4th of July this past weekend, I was going to do the JFK book tag created by the wonderful Carrie from Very Literary Carrie, who tagged me in her video. So let's jump in. Let's find out what's going on with these Kennedys. Prompt 1, Tenuvus and one more. Those were the names of the Kennedys' yachts. In my household, our yacht is known as 0 Feet. What book with a large cast of characters would you recommend? Well, there are many. But when I think of a cast, I think of a play, and I was drawn to the numerous characters who have specific identities and wonderful characterization in A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. But if we're talking about like a book, another one that is also, I think, a shorter book that has a great sprawling cast of characters, each of whom has various interesting little like quirks and identities, would be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, especially Mr. Collins, who is dynamite as a character. Dynamite. Even though he himself is the opposite of dynamite, his characterization is dynamite. Prompt 2, PT 109. What is your favorite book featuring a harrowing survival, rescue, or war story? Thankfully, I don't have any in my own real life, like truly thankfully. But one that I was drawn to when I was younger, and that I have read and reread, would be The Great Escape by Paul Brickhill. It was later filmed, and there were a whole lot of things changed. There's some great action sequences involving motorcycles and Steve McQueen in the film. But the book itself has a wonderful narrative, a real, exploration of like triumph of the human spirit, and of people finding their ways to stand up for goodness, like in whatever circumstances. It's a book I've read a number of times. I was also inspired as much from the film as from the book when I was young with my younger brother to dig our tunnel in the backyard. It got pretty darn deep. It almost became like an underground hideout. Prompt 3, Addison's disease. What is your favorite book that deals with disease or the medical field? Well, one that deals with disease kind of obliquely would be the Decameron, where we have a whole group of characters who head off to a villa to wait out the plague and amuse each other and entertain themselves by telling stories. And the stories, many of the stories are fascinating and interesting and delightful, and just a great set of stories in here. But of course, the response to that context would be in The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, where a group of wealthy people retreat from the plague into their own private abode, only to have disaster strike. So those would be two I always like to pair together on that prompt. Prompt 4, Camelot, or some island, somewhere. What real or imagined dynasty would you like to read more about? Well, one I would like to read more about, and I don't have a book from, and so if anybody could recommend one, I'd be more than delighted to, look for a copy, would be the Kita dynasty, which was very influential and ruled the Mali Empire at times for a period of years. And then the other one, historical but also wrapped up in all sorts of great stories, would be the Samanids who are described in the Shahnameh by Ferdowsi. And I've been working through this year, and it is just an absolute masterpiece, and one I highly, highly recommend. But these stories are incredible, and while not entirely historical, they certainly are deeply interesting and insightful. Prompt 5, High Hopes. That was the song that Frank Sinatra re-recorded. If you ran for office, what would your campaign song be? Well, I could have Frank Sinatra do a holographic version of My Way. But I'm also thinking that with my daughters and their love of musicals, Do You Hear the People Sing? A little like family rendition of that could be quite a bit of fun. That's from Les Miserables. We sometimes sing that on our way to the polls on election day with the girls in the back seat. They join in really well. Prompt 6, We Choose to Go to the Moon. Name the last book you read that was set in space. I'm not sure if it is the last book I read that was set in space, but one that primarily took place in space, and one that I haven't sort of returned to and talked about since I read it, would be The Ballad of Beta 2 by Samuel Delany. It's really a novella, and I read it last September and was absolutely fascinated by it. Again, a very short work that just loads tons of symbolism. There's a poem that's an old song that a character, Janani or something, is trying to analyze, and that's why he's on this space station that's sort of a dead space station in orbit. And there he's like discovering this whole culture and how it relates to this poem. And all of that occurs in about 100 pages. So really fascinating book, one I highly recommend. Prompt 7, the coconut. So JFK had scrawled out a help message on a coconut. That was later encased in plastic and was like displayed in his Oval Office. Do you have any neat desk items or mementos? No, I try to avoid distractions. I like my desk space clear. I will make notes on Post-it notes, and as I cross them off and I get rid of the Post-it note, I try not to have distractions in my workspace. The one thing I do is I do have my family pictures set up in such a way that whatever configuration my desk is in, I can see family pictures like directly across from me, and that really, is just helpful for me and kind of remaining like centered and focused. Prompt 8, scandal. What personal or political scandal would you like to read more about? I don't like to glory in the misery of others. Says the guy who reads a lot of crime fiction, but I suppose the only scandals I'm interested in are scandals that will help illuminate great misdeeds that have a common misconception about them and that need to be corrected. That's about all I can think of, and I can't think of anything specific. But as information is brought to light that provides more transparency and sort of debunks certain ideas, I think that's useful. But not to glory in like the peccadillos or the very real crimes of individuals, but really to identify, who the victims are and what we need to do to support them or to support survivors and things like that. Anyways, prompt 9, the Peace Corps. What book made you a better person? Well, I've got 2, and I would like to identify that both of these books do deal with JFK and his administration, and in clear detail show how in his space race, in the myth of Camelot, and in the desire to build establish the international standing of the JFK administration, they were more than willing to compromise things. And Reporting Civil Rights Part 1 and Parting the Waters by Taylor Branch certainly illuminate many of the things that JFK was just absolutely totally missing. And that in fact Bobby Kennedy was missing while he was Attorney General, and that he sort of course corrected on a few years later. So those are both absolutely fantastic. Prompt 10, conspiracy. What are your thoughts on the Kennedy assassination? I will try to be brief because when I was 9 years old, I got to go stay with my aunt and uncle who lived in Dallas, and spent a week with them. And one of the things we did was we went to the Texas Book School Depository, which has the 6th floor museum there. And when you walk by, there's a plaque outside the building that has like, this is where Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly shot, John F. Kennedy. And the people walking by have rubbed on the word allegedly to like rub it out as if Oswald did it. So I've been to the location. I went back some years later. We did like another family trip to Texas, and we all went there together as a family, not just me and my uncle, and we saw it again. And so I've been to the location. I've actually seen that up in that spot. I will say this. Oswald definitely did not behave in a way that we would expect an innocent person to behave. Brian and Books pointing that out. There was a rifle up there. There was a rifle that could be traced to him. There was a rifle that didn't seem to have its telescopic settings set correctly. And there was a rifle that didn't seem to have, it seemed as if it wasn't a clip of rifle bullets that had been put in, but that they would have had to be individual bullets, which would make the firing 3 shots in that short amount of time established by the Zapruder film very, very difficult, far more difficult than if he'd inserted a clip, with telescopic sightings that didn't seem to be working. So there's some issues with that. The other thing, though, that seems to be pretty clear, the 2 things I generally gravitate back towards when I think around the Kennedy assassination, I've read too many books on it, I've probably wasted too much time on it. There may or may not have been a Lego reconstruction for a high school project at one point. But the 2 things I come back to are, one, and they both relate towards physics. One is the ballistics of the magic bullet, which specifically should not have been able to destroy John Connolly's wrist, and then come out looking the way it did, and also maintain its velocity through all sorts of perambulations through the bodies both President Kennedy and Governor Connolly. And the other would be the fatal shot within the Zapruder film where we see Kennedy's head and the famous back into the left, which would seem to be a shot from the grassy knoll. So, do I think Oswald is like absolved, innocent? Not really. It's interesting that I believe the nitrate tests only came back positive for his hand, not for his cheek, suggesting he had perhaps fired a handgun but not a rifle that day. But I do think there was at least one other shooter. Who it was, we don't know. It wasn't it wasn't Woody Harrelson's dad, famously. He was actually an assassin, and murdered, I believe, a federal judge. But he's not one of the three bums. We later found out who those guys were. But I think there was a second shooter. That's all I'll say. So feel free to at me in the comments. But again, I really hope everybody's having a great week. I hope places are cooling off. I know it's been really hot. And have a good one.